Hello from the Gautry TV studio in Geneva. We are talking about financial markets and the economic situation in Europe and the US with Mr. Pautrice Gautry. He is Chief Economist of Union Bancaire Privée here in Geneva. Mr. Gautry, welcome to the studio.
Happy to be here.
So when we talk about the current labor market results from the US, this seems very positive, and it also shows an increased opportunity for a rate increase from the US. Will this come up now shortly?
Yes, exactly. As you mentioned, the labor market in the US was very, very positive recently. We have seen a low level in terms of initial jobless claims, and we have seen a strong job creation, particularly in the service sectors. And at the end also, we have seen a small rise in terms of US labor wages. So all the scenario seems to be in place now from the labor markets for the Fed to think about a first rate hike. And the most probable scenario is to have this first rate hike in September-October meeting.
So that really means then some change of regime. So can we say that this is like the end of Goldilocks period in economic terms?
The Goldilocks situation would probably continue, because what we are calling for is just a normalization process coming from the Fed. This is not a comeback to the Volcker period, for instance, because we have not saw very negative pressure coming from the inflationary side. So we do continue, we do expect that the growth will continue, and in fact a first rate hike coming from the Fed would be a very positive news about the self-sustained growth scenario in the US. That is to say, the US growth should continue in a growth environment around 2.5% or closer to 3% in the coming quarters. So good news for the economy, not the end of the growth cycle for the US.
And where do you see the right equilibrium for the US bonds and also for European bonds, for example, for German bonds?
Of course, it's important for the bond markets, and particularly with what we could call the end of equilibrium rate. That is to say, if the Fed enters in a tightening process, at which level the Fed would stop. And due to the quite reasonable growth in the US, as we said, no more than 3%, a 2.5–3% regime, I do not imagine the Fed entering in a very negative developments in terms of interest rate hike. That is to say, not to be above 3% and probably not to exceed 2% in a 1 or 2 year horizon for the Fed. So that is to say, it will be a still positive scenario for the US economy, and still moderate positive scenario for the financial markets. Some normalization, but not a huge tightening coming from the Fed.
And for example, the German Bund?
So it means, in fact, of long-term interest rates that an equilibrium should be found for the US bond markets around 2.5%. And for the Eurozone, and particularly for the bond market, probably we will test 1% in the 10-year Bund. It will be justified by the recovery, the progressive recovery we have now in the Eurozone, and particularly within the German situation. And as the ECB is expected to continue its quantitative easing, we should not have more than 1% in the Bund, in the 10-year Bund. That is to say, some positive, some still upward pressure to come in the market, but to be moderate during the course of the second part of this year.
And also quantitative easing in the Eurozone is very likely to be continued. So taking all this together, what does this mean for investors in currencies?
Of course, the developments should be important to consider in favor of the US dollar, because if we see some rise coming from the Fed, and at the same time the ECB to continue to implement its quantitative easing probably at the end of what has been presented, that is to say in September 2016, we should see the coming back of upward pressures in favor of the US dollar and to continue the downward pressure on the euro due to the changes and the spread in terms of monetary policy and the change in the Fed policy. Even if it's a moderate interest rate hike, it would be significant for the forex market to continue to price these developments and to continue to appreciate, in fact, in a very secular bull environment, the US dollar.
And when we are talking about the Eurozone, still the negotiations with the Eurozone partners and Greece are continuing. There doesn't seem to be a real political solution right now. How worried are you about the continuation of this crisis, and what do you think is a likely scenario?
I'm worried, in fact, by the lack of political agreement concerning the way how to refinance the Greek economy on the medium term. And would have expected probably more positive results since the arrival of Mr. Tsipras at the head of the Greek government. And unfortunately, from one week to another week, we see very, very negative developments and the absence of this political agreement. We know that we need, in fact, a third package from the Eurozone to continue to refinance the Greek economy, because there is no more cash, and there is also, from the Greek government, no ability to, in fact, to levy taxes, and this is a real concern. So I'm worried, very worried by the political situation and this lack of political agreement between Mr. Juncker and between Mr. Tsipras. Even if my favorite scenario is not a Grexit. That is to say, there is no interest for the Greek economy to get outside the Eurozone, because the first customer and the first supplier of the Greek economy is, in fact, the German economy. So I think that a Grexit would be at a high cost for the Greek economy and would not be sustainable to continue to live outside the Eurozone. So, but we have to find a political agreement, and this is what is lagging at this point of time.
So we have to continue to review this situation that is probably going to continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Gautry, for being here today.
Thank you for your invitation.
And thanks for watching. Do make sure to keep clicking back on the Dukascopy TV website for latest updates and exclusive interviews. Have a great day and see you next time.